TFT Set 6.5, the mid set champion tier list. I've never made a TFT champ tier list, but I've been playing since original set 4, which I know is probably not too long, but I've been playing for the most part non-stop. I did not enjoy last set. I did not enjoy set 5 or 5.5. I think it's the worst one of the 3 that I've played. But I think this is arguably my favorite one. I really enjoyed 4 and 4.5. So this one is definitely up there as well. So I'm just going to put based on what I've seen and overall consistency based upon all these. Now obviously, depending upon the traits, the augments, the items, and the team, any of these champs can be S tier and any of these champs can be D tier. But like I said, I'm just going for overall consistency and the possibility of them being wherever I put them. But please let me know down in the comments where you guys think I should put them, where you guys would like to see people, what you guys think of my placements, and why, and whatnot. But let's get started. So Ahri, I think Ahri, honestly, is probably one of the biggest problem childs of this set, and I think she's probably one of the best. I think she's very frustrating to play against, especially with the right items. I think Syndicate has definitely gone up in value this mid set and is very worth playing. I think she's one of the most solid and relatively consistent carries. I do think I'm not going to drop her to A because I do think she's a S tier champion, but the only reason why I might say she's in A is because I do feel like she's very reliant upon items to be successful. But I think if you even have some decent items on her, she's an S tier champion for sure. And that's whether you play it with Arcanist or Syndicate or some type of halfway build. Alistar, I think I have to go Alistar in B. And honestly, I feel like he's very underrated. I would put him in A. Literally the only reason why I'm not putting him in A is because of the Colossus trait. I think sometimes having one unit take up 2 slots can really devastate your team. I think, between him and Cho'gath doing it, I think those are both, and even Galio now, solid and for the most part worth taking up the 2 slots. But sometimes that can be hindering to your team. I think if he was just a regular champion and there's no Colossus trait, definitely A tier for sure. I think the Hextech trait is very good for him. I think his ultimate is very solid, a lot of health, 4-cost carry for sure. Definitely try to put him in and use him. I didn't for a little while in this set, and then once I did, I realized how good he can be, especially with some defensive items and stuff. And even Jeweled Gauntlet, I think he's the scion of last set, I would say, is him. Actually, was that this set? That might have been this original set. I might be dumb. I think it was actually, yeah. So he's basically just Scion. So if he's worth it, it's basically, gotta get him started up and right items. But overall solid. Ashe, I think Ashe goes in B. Again, I think I could put her in A. I think she's a little bit too inconsistent though. I think the sniper trait is not good in this mid set. I think it's one of the worst. But she can definitely deal out a whole lot of damage, especially with the right items, and her being a 2-cost, she's not difficult to 3-star at all. Obviously, there's some games where you just can't get her, and some games where you get all of her and you're not running her. That's any champion. But again, very solid amount of DPS. Especially with the right items, and again the Syndicate trait is very good this mid set. Yeah. Blitzcrank, I think I just have to put him in C. I think he's just a very solid early game champion, being one of probably the best disruptor in the game as far as overall consistency, being able to instantly pull someone in the furthest, spot, can really destroy some teams. I think his traits were better this original set, and obviously he lost one this mid set, but still, he's just a very early game splash champion, and even if you don't add him as a trait bot, which I think that's exactly what he is, he's gonna definitely help your team pull off some wins by pulling out a solid backline champion. Brand, I think I have to put Brand in C. I think he's a little underwhelming, but he is a one-cost champ. I think Debonair Brand isn't really going to win you games either. I think it's also hard to warrant putting items on him. Now, I have ran Brand with like a Jeweled Gauntlet and Blue Buff, and he honestly was winning me rounds for sure. Like, he's not a slouch by any means, but I think if he were literally just a higher cost, he would be higher, but I think just being one cost and the fact that he's overall easy to kill, and does somewhat fall off for sure, I think he just has to be a little bit lower. Or just put Vigor, obviously, at S tier. Very difficult to get, but even at a 1-star, gonna just destroy people. 2-star, gonna win. 3-star, first place for sure. That's without items. But that was just a little cheeky pull out there. Zerry, I think I have to put down at C as well. I think she's just probably the most inconsistent 5-cost champ in the game. I honestly don't think the Debonair trait in this mid set is very good. I don't think the VIP status is very great for everybody as well. Brand's is kind of lackluster. Syndra's is kind of lackluster. Leona can be turned into an unkillable machine for the most part, running her that way, but still not the best. Draven's is probably the most consistent and best, but even then it's hard to always consistently find. I do forget what Zerry's is, but I don't think it makes her that much better. I think she's just too inconsistent for a 5-cost champion. The potential to carry is there, mostly because she's a 5-cost, but overall you're better off running somebody else. That's just my opinion. Silco, I have to put down here as well. I think I have literally won so many rounds because someone else was running Silco and it was killing his team. And that's even happened to me as well. I think the fact that he literally kills your units can be so devastating to your team, can literally lose you rounds. And I've seen it before a million times, and I've played with and against it where it's literally won or lost me rounds because they got injected and then blew themselves up, and he himself is awful. He doesn't do any damage, doesn't do anything. He's literally just boosts other people, which yeah is great, but then when he injects somebody and kills them, it can definitely cause some issues. Brom, I think Brom is A. Honestly, maybe like A minus B plus if that were, a slot. I think he's, a solid front line, and if you are running syndicates, Brom and Darius for the 2 bodyguard is insta splash. I think he has arguably one of the best CCs in the game for sure. But honestly, I feel like he's a little underwhelming. I think he's somewhat easy to kill unless you have the right items and stuff on him. I think he's just overall not the best frontline champion. I think he's mostly carried by his CC. I think if he wouldn't have that... Sorry, I had to plug in my mic, so there's probably buzzing now. But still, solid for 4 cost and can definitely hold up and, for the most part, carry. Caitlyn is difficult. The problem with her is that early game, getting the early snipe and basically granting yourself an insta-kill is great. I think the biggest problem with Caitlyn is that her traits are not that good. Is Enforcer good? Yes. Is Sniper good? It can be very much more less consistent than Enforcer, but I think her traits just really keep her down in the lower tiers, and she's a 1 cost, so she will fall off, but I do think her upside, especially early game, is pretty high because, you know, early game she basically, her ult is a guaranteed kill, and she does alright damage, but after the early game, unless you 3-star her, and I'm not even sure that it's worth it, as well as keeping her in, then, you know, I don't know. Camille, I think, is down here as well. I think, you know, she's kind of just a 1 cost trait bot. I think for certain builds she's the only frontline champ, but she falls off so hard and she's not worth putting items on that she's just not worth. I think she's solid, especially early game, and especially to, you know, get some early challenger traits involved, or even maybe run some innovator clockwork type thing, but, you know, like I said, basically just a 1 cost trait bot that is going to fall off pretty hard for being a frontline champion. Cho'gath, ooh. I think Cho'gath is A, and the only reason why he's not an S is because of the mutant trait, the fact that it's different every single game. I think that plays a huge factor, and obviously being a Colossus, taking up 2 spots, but he's probably the most consistent Colossus to take up 2 spots, only because I feel like he's much more consistent than Alistair. You could argue that Galio, wherever he is dropped to in here, is obviously worth the 2 trait spots, but being able to, you know, always consider having a 5 cost champion on your team is not a viable strat. Having a 3 cost Colossus is much more viable and early, especially because if you get him as an early drop, or even find him early and buy him and place him out there, the stacks that he can get and end up in the late game is insane. But again, I think the only reason why he's not an S is Colossus and the mutant trait always switching every game, so some games he might not be that great, some games he'll be, you know, insane. But definitely a very, very solid unit for sure. Corky, Corky is a little difficult. I think I have to put him in A, maybe B, but I think he's definitely a problem champ currently in the set. I think more so if he has the right items, he will absolutely destroy a team with no problem. But again, I think his traits aren't necessarily the best. I think he obviously is very good with a full Yordle team. I think the frontline Yordles can hold enough for him to do a massive amount of damage for sure. I think getting to that point and getting him the right items is why he's not any higher, and also why he could be lower. But I do know that I've played with and against him to know that he's a problem. We're going to swap and go Alawi. I think Alawi is arguably the worst champ this set. Now, I like her in League. I think I wanted her to be so good this set because I actually just like who she is and whatnot and her traits and stuff. But the mercenaries are way too inconsistent to use. And other than that, she's just a bruiser trait bot for the early game. She's not gonna be crazy and win you anything. Maybe early game she will a little bit, but I mean, of all the bruisers in the game, you know, if you're trying to even get 6 and then throw in other stuff, like, you're dropping her, you know. Early game, if you're running her, who you dropping? You're dropping Malawi, you know. Like, I want her to be good, and maybe you could say she's C tier, but at best she's C and not any higher for sure. I think she's probably the only champ that's going to be D tier, unfortunately, for her, but it is what it is. Darius, I think I'll put Darius in B. I think he's one of the better one-cost champs only because of his healing ability, being able to swing around and do massive amount of damage and heal himself back up. Especially early game is a problem, but you know, like any one-cost champion, he will fall off, and he's not always worth putting items on. But the Syndicate trait obviously does help as well, and I'll probably keep saying that because I think it's still one of the best traits in this set currently. Definitely a lot of carry viability in the game. But overall solid, I would say. Probably one of the best one-cost champs in the game, at least as far as consistency. Draven, A tier. The only reason why I'm not putting in S tier is because I fucking hate the guy. I think every set they bring back people like him or Warwick, and they don't change anything that they do. And what do you put on Draven? You put a Bloodthirster, possibly Rage Blade, depending on if you're running Challenger or not. And then it's, you know, Infinity Edge, Last Whisper, and he wins you the game. Top 4 for sure. Like, it's just fucking annoying. Even worse if you have the VIP Debonair version of him. Yeah. Definitely a good champ, but also definitely hate him. Echo, I think I have to put Echo in B for sure. Maybe A because he has 3 traits now. But I think if you have the correct items, he's definitely a champ. But unless you have Innovator Heart, they're pretty much not worth running to me. Scrap isn't the, you know, it's a splash trait, and then it's hard to run assassins with him because, like, let's just say you're running 6 assassins. Well, okay, where is he alting? Like, it's not gonna do enough. I think he's a good champ if he's probably the best splash trait champion in the game currently. I would just say that. You know, if you need a second assassin, he's going to be good. He's going to buff your team. If you need, you know, another scrap, again, there you go. If you need, you know, a solid innovator to do some work, there you go. But overall, not the most amazing. Ezreal, I think is a C. I think he's relatively easy to 3-star, can do a whole lot of damage with a whole lot of items, and his traits aren't awful, but they're not that great. Again, I think a lot of the one costs are just literally splash trait champions, trait bots. But I would say he's one of the better ones as far as damage dealt and consistency. I'm actually going to put Ziggs down here with the Lowy. I cannot stand when he throws that fucking ball up in the sky and it takes 20 years to go land and it misses people. He doesn't do any damage besides that, and if he misses that, it's fucking over. Of all the Yordles, he's probably the worst. I would rather Lulu heal the shit out of me than him miss the bombs the whole fucking fight. Galio is probably, I'll keep him an A only because he has 3 traits. Now, one of those traits is Colossus, which is difficult to put him any higher for sure. He's definitely not S tier, but Socialite is the most splashed trait just because, you know, it's essentially free to splash in, no problem, and it only buffs your team. You only need, you know, one person to get it, or more obviously. Bodyguard is not as great, but obviously being a 5-cost champion and having a whole area effective CC is very good. But I think he's, as far as traits and him taking up 2 slots, it makes him a little hard to always consistently run and a little underwhelming at times. But overall solid. You know, he's not gonna do bad for you. Gangplank, I have to put in B. I think, again, the mercenary trait is too difficult to consistently run to call it a good trait. The twin shot, while I think it is picking up currently now, in this current patch that I am in, which you might be watching at a different time, the twin shot is solid, but I think overall he's just not an insane champ. I think he's just a very solid 3-cost who does have the potential to carry, but I think he does need a little bit too much help in that carry aspect to make him higher on the tiers. Gnar, I think I have to put my boy Gnar all the way at S. I think that dude is insane. I think the striker trait is always basically splashable. The fact that he can go into any person, honestly any, I mean if you think of, okay, if you're running Innovators with a Socialite, you can add a Gnar. If you're running Enchanters, Socialite, okay, you have a Gnar. You know, he's always splashable. Anybody that runs Strikers, okay, you're running Hextech, you're running Scrap. You're running even, you know, Mutants or Bruisers with Rek'Sai as the striker. Like, you can throw in a Gnar and he's gonna do work for you. If you put, you can, and that's the thing with too, it's so hard to put items on him because you don't know whether you want him to be a tank, which he's good at doing, or you don't know if you want him to have like Infinity Edge or Last Whisper and do an insane amount of damage, which he is also good at doing. I think he's probably the best 3-cost champ in the game for sure, and I think he's just the most consistent in doing it. I think he's hard to kill because then he turns into Mega Gnar, and I think he does good damage and can, you know, tank as much as he can to win you rounds for sure. Aurelia, even though she has been a problem, especially more recently this set, I think I'm going to put her in A. I think the Scrap trait keeps her from being an S, and I know that probably by the time a lot of people are watching this, they've probably nerfed her to the ground, so she won't be as good. But she's definitely a problem. I think she is 100% a 4-cost carry possibility for sure. She's definitely, even if they nerf her to the ground, she's still an A tier unit, or a champ, whatever. But I just cannot put her in S. Even though currently she's probably S tier champ, I know that they're gonna nerf her and she will go down. Zyra, I'm gonna put in B, and literally only because a lot of traits have multiple backline carries. You know, if you're running Yordles, you have some backlines in a line. If you're running Scholars, if you're running Arcanists, pretty much anything. And even if it's not backline and it's, you know, Bruiser comp and they're all in a straight line or whatever, if her ultimate hits, it is amazing. But she does miss a shit ton like Ziggs. Especially early game when there's not that many champions, she's not even guaranteed, you know, some damage or an ultimate hit. But I think her upside is insane. She's easy to 3-star because not enough people run her. Her traits are good, solid ones, nothing to really complain about. And if she does hit her ult, it can literally win you some games. She definitely can't be higher because she can miss the ult. But I really don't think she can be lower because of all the plus side and upside that she does have. Zillion, I think is C. I think his ult is very good, but overall just kind of underwhelming. Again, kind of more just a trait bot type of guy, and you know, sometimes even his ult doesn't work, you know, on Colossus champs or, you know, whatever. And he doesn't do basically any damage other than that. He's kind of just, I would argue that he might be one of the better disruptors in the game for sure because of his ult, but other than that, he's pretty much worthless. Like, if you change his ult to something different, he'd probably be D tier. Obviously, depending upon what you change it to. Oh, who's next? I believe this is Jarvan. This picture is some of these pictures are a little different, but I don't see. Maybe we'll wait. I might forget. All right, Zach. I think Zach is B. I think he would have been A had they kept a mutant trait on him, and had him 3 trait 3 cost. But he's still very solid. Having a solid Chemtech frontline is good, and I think he's one of the more consistently damaging bruisers. You know, Cho'gath, unless he's, you know, ulting, he's not as damaging. Rek'Sai is probably arguably the best damage bruiser, but I think he's solid enough for being able to tank some stuff, and especially if you're running Chemtech, him healing it back up and stuff, there's a big upside in doing that. I think he's just solid. There's nothing too amazingly positive or negative to say, so I think just putting him in a solid B is good. Poppy, I think Poppy's a B tier. I think she's a B tier 1 cost. I think early bodyguards are good and easy to splash. I think her ability / ultimate is good, throwing it to a backline champion if you can't get damage to the backline is good and can sometimes win you the fight. And the fact that it comes back and gives her some shield. I say the downside to that is that you have to wait for the buckle to come back to get the shield, and that has caused me to get her killed so many times, as I'm sure many of you have seen as well. But I think she's a solid champ. I don't think that she's necessarily lost me fights, except for the times that her buckle doesn't get there in time. But I don't think that she's bad at all. Malzahar, A tier for sure. Again, he could be S tier, but I think the mutation plays a huge factor. He's probably one of my favorite champs to run. I think he's just super solid, can definitely wreck some teams, especially, honestly, in any mutation. If you have a Cho'gath and Rek'Sai holding the front with 2 bruisers and splashing him in for the 3 mutant, no matter what the mutation is that game, he's probably gonna end up winning you the fight because those 2 will just kind of tank it. Especially with the right items, and I feel like he is, for the most part, easy to 3-star unless other people are running him, which, you know, can be said about anybody. But I think as far as consistency, damage dealt, and carry ability, he is one of the better ones in the game, especially for, you know, a 3-cost champ. And, you know, anybody in the game can literally be a carry with the right items and right builds, you know, like I said, but overall consistency, he's definitely up there for sure. Warwick is a difficult person to place. I think I have to go B, only because the upside and downside of him is kind of a lot, and I think he needs a pretty decent amount of help to be successful. I think he definitely needs Challenger and or Rage Blade, or both, more than likely, to make him even more scary. I feel like he's, for the most part, easy to 3-star, but a lot of people, you know, I would say at least one person in each game is running some kind of Chemtech and or Challenger variation, so if you're also running him, he'd be harder to 3-star, but, you know, being a 2 cost, obviously easier than 3-starring him than anybody that costs more. But I think I have to keep him in B because the upside and downside are both somewhat high, so I think just a solid B slot is there. Vi, I think, is honestly super underrated. I mean, she gets her ult damn near instantly. And her ult, you know, while the first 1 to 2 might not be the best, I think the fact that she's ulting so much, and has, you know, essentially 3 traits, really only 2, but the third one is hers alone, and she's not a 5 cost, is very, very good. Definitely always worth throwing into your bruiser and or enforcer comps, or as a, you know, a trait pot. Super solid, especially with some items on her. Can definitely carry and win you the fight for sure. Orianna, I think, is B. I think, again, the upside to her is great. The downside is also large as well. She's very hard to play around. Her traits are decent, but again, she's one of these people that you're splashing in. She's not, I wouldn't consider her a carry by any means. I think she can carry, but you're not going to build your team to go, okay, I want an Orianna carry, or I want to run an Orianna game. Like, she's just one of the people that you put in that does a solid job, for sure. The area effect CC is insane, and can definitely turn the tide in some fights. Lulu, I think you just have to put in C. I have seen some nasty Lulu builds where she's got like blue buff, Spear Shojin and shit, to where she's just fucking increasing everybody's size and healing at an insane rate. I do feel like she's easy to 3-star because 1, the Yordle trait, but 2, no one really runs her. You know, if you're running enchanters, she's the one you're putting in or out, you know what I'm saying? She's not the holding carry, you know, you're gonna go Morgana, Orianna, Seraphine's not, but Senna. You know, you're gonna run those people before you run Lulu as far as the enchanter thing. But overall, not the best. I feel like she's been the same every single set, and just not really. She's always just kind of underwhelming. She's just kind of there, and she can't really carry your team. She's just gonna. She does her job well, I think, but not well enough. Kassadin, I think, has to go and C also. I think he's. I think probably early game he's probably A tier champ, but again, 1 cost champion, he'll fall off. I think depending upon the mutation, that can really affect him. And, you know, being a mutant scholar, his traits are just somewhat on the more inconsistent side. But especially early game, solid for sure. His ult is definitely not that bad. It's definitely can win you some fights, causing other people to not be able to caster ability as well as shield himself for some sustain, but not really up there. Victor, I think I have to put Victor in B, and only because he takes so long to ult. I can't really base it upon everybody's items. I think obviously if this man has some good items, he can probably one ult and wipe the whole board. But the problem is that he's a very good 5-cost champion, but you might be in trouble if your team hasn't held long enough or hasn't killed enough people or done enough damage when his ult goes off. If you have the right items and or the right build, definitely A tier for sure. But I think he's just a little too inconsistent with his ult. Vex, B. I would have put old Vex in A for sure, but I feel like she's still just kind of not in the best spot. I think the tank ability just isn't there so much. Again, obviously, you know, if she's 3-starred with the right traits, or not right traits, right items and everything, she can definitely, you know, tank and not die. But I think the old Vex would absolutely never die, which obviously was a problem, but I think she does need a little bit of a buff. But overall solid, you know, very, very solid front line, even to splash in with no trait. But I do feel that she's a little bit on the more underwhelming side now than she was at the original set. Syndra, I would say B. I think throwing units is very good, especially at doing damage. The VIP version of her I don't think is very worth it. You know, again, if you're going to take a VIP version, you're going to take more than likely somebody else. I do think though, again, with the right items and everything, she has a huge upside and can destroy some teams, and can also very much help your backline carry stay alive by tossing somebody that's close to her and or them, you know, far, far away, as well as doing damage to them. So the upside is good, but I feel like there's just nothing insanely good about her to make her much more higher. Jhin, I have to throw in B, again, literally only because his traits are terrible. I think him himself as a champion and his ultimate is good. I think his traits are the reason why he does not always succeed. He's very difficult to pull off consistently with the correct team. And item-wise, I think he does somewhat need a little bit of help. Good for cost, but, you know, if you're looking for a carry, there's plenty of other people to choose that are going to be much more consistent than Jhin. Seraphine, I think I have to put in A. Definitely not S, but a very, very solid 4 cost. Even if you're not running innovators, at least she can splash in 1 or more socialite depending on the rest of your comps. And, you know, the massive amount of healing and damage she does in the area of the map, not even including if you have items, is very, very solid. I think she's just an overall very solid unit. Again, no matter what you're running, if you throw her in, she's not gonna do you any harm for sure. Sivir, A tier. I think the only reason why she's not an S is because I do feel like she does need some correct items. She's still going to do an insane amount of damage without items and just with, you know, Hextech and or Striker. But I think the difference is to get her to S, she does have to have some items. With the right items, for sure, she's S, like probably, you know, S plus or something with the correct items, even depending upon what other traits she's running. But without items, she's definitely not as good, and can be a little underwhelming without them. Let's see, Lucian I think is B. I honestly want him to be able to be a secondary carry for the Hextechs, but at this point I think it's Sivir and honestly Alistar as far as who can carry the Hextechs. I think he should be buffed, because I don't think he's that amazing. I think to get him to the A tier, you have to have items on him, and even then, those items are probably better off going on somebody else that could do better. You know, like if you're wanting him to shoot faster and you have a Rage Blade, but you have a Sivir, okay, splash that shit onto Sivir. Static Shiv, Sivir. You know, Jeweled Gauntlet, okay, probably on him and not Sivir, but honestly, Jeweled Gauntlet on Alistar is very good, especially if your Alistar's 2-star, which you probably can get him to there because nobody runs enough of him. So there's just better Hextech carries. But overall, honestly, you know, I know I'm shitting on him, but that's because I want him. I see the potential, but he's just not there. But he is solid, especially, you know, with a twin shot early game or something. He can do his job, but there's just better people to do it. Jinx is B. I feel like a lot of people have been shitting on Jinx for a long time, saying she's just not as good. And I kind of agree. I think Jinx from the original set 6 is probably A tier, but I think this mid set, the fact that she kinda doesn't flow with anybody, as far, you know, her traits just aren't the best. You know, Scrap and Twin Shot are the traits itself good, sure, but, you know, once you pull off getting a Jinx, she kinda is just a splash trait 5 cost and not really, you know, somebody that you can swap out to make better. You know, at least Victor, Chemtech, Arcanist, you can swap some, you know, a Chemtech or an Arcanist out and he will outperform them. Obviously, you know, she'll outperform any Scrap or other Twin Shot champ, but you're more than likely to run these other 5-cost champions traits than you are to run Scrap and Twin Shot and have her be super viable, in my opinion. But with the right items and shit, she can definitely shred a team for sure. But, you know, again, that's literally anybody in the game, so you can't make it much better. Tom Kench is difficult. The reason is that taking out a champion is so very good, but I don't think, I think I have to put him in A. I think that can, you know, definitely win you some rounds. I personally just don't really have anything crazy good to say about him. I think he's a solid champ with the right items. I don't think there's too much downside to running him. Just definitely be careful with feeding him or switching placements with him and accidentally feeding him, you know, someone on your actual team. But other than that, solid. But you're also only really going to splash him in if you're running Bruiser, or just splash him in just to do it so he'll eat somebody. Mercenary trait with him is, again, I'll probably shit on Mercenary the whole entire time, and that's just because it's hard to pull off. It's obviously the hardest trait to pull off in the set. If you can, the upside is S tier. If you can't, it's D tier. You know what I'm saying? It's just, that's just what it is. Twitch. I'll put Twitch in B only because I know Twitch reroll is still somewhat viable. And his traits are good. I think the problem is, yeah, honestly it's B, because even if you do throw some items on him and he kind of just falls off or doesn't really work out, he's a good person to hold items at the worst version of Twitch, you know? Especially early game, he's really solid. I think he's just can't be above B. Tryndamere, I'm gonna put Tryndamere in B, and here's why. I would put him in A because I think he can carry a team, do a whole lot of damage. He can swing to the back line. But honestly, there has been so many times where this man is one swing away from killing a unit, and then he ults away and doesn't kill them. And then that unit either, is the reason that they won, or that unit starts healing themselves or something. And it's so frustrating to see that. And as far as other damage units for the traits that he has, there's probably better people to do it. But his traits are very good with Chemtech and Challenger, and that gives you literally 2 Chemtech or 2 Challenger instantly. So 3 Chemtech is easy to get. But I think that's the reason why I cannot put him in A, is that there has been way too many times that man has spun away from someone that's literally like one swing away from death, and that can honestly cost you the round. So for that reason, he's in B. Misfortune, I think I can put Misfortune in B. I think her ult is very, very solid. I think her traits, again, are probably the worst in the game. But for a 3-cost champ and a splash trait champ and a pretty good ult, I'll keep her in B. Definitely not any higher. Probably should be in C. But she can shred some teams with, the right traits and items and builds and whatnot. Morgana, I have to put an A. I don't think she's a S tier, but I think she's better than B. I think she's a very, very solid frontline champ that can do a pretty good amount of damage. It can hold. Again, I'll bring back the Syndicate talk. There's so many. I think the biggest thing with Syndicate is that there is so many possibilities with carries. You can carry with Ahri, you can carry with Morgana, you can carry with Ashe, maybe even a little bit of Zyra, and then you just have these 2 frontline champs that are solid that, can win you the game. Sorry, I'm talking too much. Getting a fucked up throat. But yeah, Morgana's ult is very good. And I think she just does solid damage for what she does. And her traits are good, because even if you run Enchanter, that's a solid splash trait. Kai'Sa, I can put Kai'Sa in S. Definitely an A, but I think the reason she goes into S is because her ult puts her away from people so it can keep her alive. And that can also cause you to make some very, very solid items for her to stay alive even longer and or keep others alive longer as well, and does an insane amount of damage. I don't think she's too OP. I think she becomes OP with the right items, which, again, that can be anybody. So I think overall, consistency, she's definitely up there, and her traits are very viable to put her in. And honestly, even if not, she's definitely one of those people that you can just throw in and she'll do a decent job. Leona, I would have to say, is A, almost only if you have the right stuff. I think she can be very, very difficult to kill. I think her VIP version with the Debonair can be a very, very solid choice in keeping her alive and making sure that other people do enough damage to kill everybody. I don't have anything bad to say about her, so I think she's just a very, very solid possible carry or minimum frontline holder for sure. Senna, I think probably a lot of people are gonna want her higher, but I think she's B. I think she's arguably the most splashable, one of the most splashable champs in the set. The possibility of carrying is there, but I think she's more of just, she's probably the best trait bot in the set, and we'll just go with that. Potential to carry is there, the traits are good, does good damage and heals people, but I think she needs a little bit of help in being able to carry and or win you the rounds, but I think it's there. Quinn, honestly, to me is super underrated. I think her ability / ultimate is very, very good. I mean, being able to disarm a lot of people, essentially, the possibility of a lot of people is insane. She does decent damage. The mercenary thing, obviously, you know, is but even the challenger trait, and even with items, and she's easy to 3-star because nobody runs her, is very good. And again, her ultimate, I think, is super underrated. I think it can cause huge problems to disarm multiple people for multiple seconds, you know. Overall, very solid. Talon, I'll have to go A. I think VIP Talon might be, or B, I'm sorry, VIP Talon could be an A. But I don't know. I think he's just not as consistent as I would like him to be. His traits are alright. He does alright with the bleed and can definitely win you fights with the bleed. And then doing the VIP version of him with the true damage is nasty. But again, I think there might be better VIP options sometimes, and the consistency isn't necessarily there, but still very solid. Singed, I think he's C. I think he's just kind of trait body, maybe B, like C plus B minus. I think tossing somebody up and splashing them to the back, doing some damage is good, but you're really never going to throw items on him. Which you could say the same for Poppy, but I think Poppy can hold longer than Singed. And obviously being a 1 cost, you kind of just fall off and not do amazing. Swain, I think I'll have to put Swain in B as well. I think Swain is mostly carried upon his traits and why he's in so many comps. He can definitely win you fights with the amount that he can heal and the amount of people he can damage. But I think, I don't know, he's a little, not necessarily underwhelming, but doesn't always get the job done as he should. But again, you know, 2-cost champ, solid. He's definitely not going to be the reason you necessarily lose a fight. Sejuani, I have to put in B. Every single set this chick comes out, everybody loves her, thinks she's the best. I don't get it. I think she's terrible. The only reason she's any good this set, and you have to admit is because she's a three trait champ. You know, Enforcer, Bruiser, and Hextech. So she's always somebody's build. She's probably the best splashable one because it's just better. You know, more than obviously easily splashable is even more better splashable to just throw in if you're running Bruisers. Okay, if you already have an Enforcer or want one, there you go. If you're running Hextech, she's in there. You know, and then she can cause other people to come in. You know, if you're running her and you run Vi, then there you go. That's 2 traits with 2 people. But I feel like her ultimate and her sustain is just not there. Rek'Sai, I think I'll put him in A, and honestly, because he does have 3 traits, and again, I think they're all Sejuani's, but I think his ability to heal keeps him more alive. But again, with the mutation as one of his traits, can be an up or down swing for him. But I think he's much more consistent and better than Sejuani is. And again, having a 2 cost that has 3 traits is very, very good. Jace, I'll put in A. But again, I don't feel like his traits are that good. But I think the biggest reason why he's an A, other than the fact that he's a 5 cost champ that's good, is the fact that you can put him in the front or back line and he will switch to adhere to those placements. And that's basically it. The problem is I don't think this is right. So this is Jarvan. I think Jarvan is fucking terrible. I don't know why they keep nerfing him. The dude is probably the worst 1 cost in the game to me. Probably should be D tier, but the buff is nice, and he's, again, splashable. But I don't think he's worth a shit. No damage. His ultimate or ability, honestly, is not that good. I don't get why it's nerfed. It doesn't feel like it does anything ever. And then I know one of these is Nocturne, but I don't know who the fuck this other person is. I know obviously Renata, so we'll just do Renata. This is difficult. I think Renata has to go in B only because she can only go to A tier with correct items. With the correct items, she's definitely A or even S tier, but I think with Renata without any items is not that great. I think she's solid, but I don't think if she had no items, I don't think she can carry your team even as a 2-star 4 cost. With the right items, for sure, definitely much higher. Nocturne, I'll put in B. I think he's one of the best early game champs, being able to essentially make someone not attack for X amount of time is disgusting. Yeah, I think he's just a overall solid. Oh, that's Kha'Zix. That's who it is. Jesus Christ. Okay, but yeah, Nocturne definitely solid and causes a whole lot of disruption and problems for anybody, no matter what build you're running. And then Kha'Zix. I think Kha'Zix is honestly a little underwhelming. Again, just like everybody else, the right items, he can be very destructive, and with the right mutation, even more so. But honestly, for a 4 cost, I feel like he's just a little bit too underwhelming for me. I don't find him to be consistent enough as he should, but the upside is definitely there, so we'll just splash him in the solid. But let me know what you guys think, where you guys would place everybody, what your guys' thoughts on where my placement is, or my thoughts on each champ. You know, obviously, like I've been saying, anybody has the ability, honestly, to be S tier, and anybody has the ability to be D tier, dependent upon a whole lot of factors, but overall consistency, I feel like this is where most people are at, or at least close to it.